Hello and welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and today I'm joined by Jane Hogan, the wellness engineer. Jane blends proven leading edge science and ancient spiritually inspired practices to help people release chronic pain using the mind, body, and breath so they become empowered creators of their own health. Her personal experience of reversing crippling rheumatoid arthritis, which she shares during this episode, using natural solutions, inspired her to leave a 30-year engineering career and become a functional medicine certified health coach. Jane has helped thousands of people release chronic pain naturally. She is the host of the Wellness by Design podcast, and her empowering message has been featured on numerous podcasts and summits. She's been published in Thrive Global and Elephant Journal magazines and is a contributing author on 3 best-selling books. Jane is the host of Becoming Pain-Free online summits, empowering thousands of participants towards pain-free living. In this episode, Jane and I discuss her story. We talk about what causes pain to become chronic, really rooted in trauma, a little bit of a spoiler there. We talk about what you can do when you blend science-based medicine with ancient spiritual practices. And we discuss her pain-free by design blueprint, as well as a little bit about her upcoming book. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Welcome back to Pain Free for Life, where we share how to successfully overcome all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And now, here's your host, co-founder, and board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Dr. Rob Vanbergen.
Hello, Jane. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hello, Rob. I'm so happy to be here. I always love having conversations with you.
Yeah, it's always fun. And, we've got a fair bit to talk about today, but I wanted to start by just asking you to share a little bit about your journey, how you got into this space. Everyone always has such interesting stories about how they come into holistic health and well-being.
We all have our story, right? Because who comes to it naturally? No one does. You come when you got a problem. And I was like that too, just going along, living my life. I was working as an engineer. My children last one had just left the nest. My husband and I were a few years away from retirement, but really kind of getting close. And then I had this big stressful year. It started with my mother dying suddenly, and we were really best friends, and it was a total shock. She wasn't even on medications or anything. And so there was that shock. And then I was also the executor of her, estate. It doesn't sounds like it's a big fancy thing, but it's just like the house and the contents. And I have 2 older siblings and 1 younger sibling. And so there is there was a lot to deal with. My parents had been travelers and collectors, so there was a ton of stuff in the house, and they were big readers, and they had books, never got rid of books, and just a lot of collectibles. And there was just a lot to deal with. And it was a 7-hour drive away from where I live. So I spent a year kind of dealing with that. And almost a year to the day after my mother died, while I was at her house painting and boxing stuff up, this pain started. And it started in my one shoulder. I can't remember if it was left or right, but it was so bad that my arm had to go in a sling. Like, it was that severe. And then the next day, there was no pain in that shoulder, but the other shoulder was in pain. And I had to put that one in a sling. I mean, and then over the next few days, it just started. It was my feet. And I thought, oh, I'm just getting older. I guess I need orthotics. I just turned 50. Okay, I guess I'm orthotic age now. So I got orthotics, but that got worse. And then my hands started to hurt. My knees started to swell up really, really badly. Like, I had golf ball swellings on my knees, and my jaw started to hurt, my wrists. I mean, it was just all over. And I thought, okay, I knew that it had to be related to stress because it was just so clear. Didn't have much stress, and then I had this big stressful event. And so I kind of thought, all right, I just need to take a holiday and I'll be fine. So I took some time off, and I dealt with my mother's estate. Everything was done, and I got worse. and my husband was gone to work, and I was just lying in bed, actually, just, like, waking up, and it turns out later I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. That's always worse in the morning. So I wake up in the morning, "Oh, it's still here," and by that point, I could hardly walk, and I had no grip strength in my hands, and I was barely able to look after myself. And I remember just thinking, we waited our whole lives for this freedom, the freedom years, and I'm not gonna be able to do anything. I'm just gonna be a burden to everyone, and what's the point? And I wasn't quite suicidal, but I remember saying, "If this is the way my life is gonna be, I'm ready to be done." And in the next moment, I heard a voice that was in my head, but not my voice, clear, said, "This is not how your life is going to turn out. You're going to figure this out, and you will teach people." And it was just I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that, Rob, where it's like this deep, deep inner knowing. And so from that point on, I knew I was still in pain, but I knew I was going to figure this out. And that just started me like about a week later. My family doctor, really unusual, she happened to mention that gluten and dairy can cause joint pain. And so I cut those out and I did have a bit of a reduction, but that started me on a path of finding functional medicine and doing all these lifestyle things, and I got a little crazy with it, in terms of anti-inflammatory diets and all that stuff, thinking that was the answer. And then eventually I discovered and I had always been interested in mind-body medicine, and I realized that there was, like, a lot going on with my nervous system that went way back to childhood, probably all triggered again with the siblings, when after my mother died. So, it took me a while, but I did reverse it all.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because pain is something that we can either let defeat us or it can teach us something. We can take something away from it. And it's kind of like taking those experiences, as you say, and teaching other people that it doesn't have to be the end because you kind of
Mhm.
mentioned finding functional medicine. And it's a search, isn't it? It's to try and find something that just doesn't like it is not out there. And the medical approach makes you feel like, as you say, you're just doomed. That's it. You're
Yes.
done. So it puts you in a
Yeah.
dark place.
Well, when I finally did get in to see a rheumatologist and I had the diagnosis, I was actually already on my path of starting to feel better. But when they offered me the drugs they offered me, just I didn't like the side effects. I mean, the side effect of cancer, what's the point?
Yeah,
So, as much as I was still experiencing pain, I thought, I don't wanna go that route unless I have to. Now, that was my personal choice. I'm not saying that people do that. That was my choice, and I never did go on any medications. In fact, once I realized even what NSAIDs do to
yeah,
your gut, I stopped even taking those. 'Cause I started seeing pain in a different light, Rob. I started seeing it as information. It was how my body was trying to communicate with me. And so if I covered it up, I was losing information. I wasn't getting all the information I needed. So, I'm an engineer, problem solver,
yeah.
that's why cut off that key piece of information? And, so I did that. And, eventually I was like, I even realized I did engineering because my father wanted me to do engineering.
Right.
I was a good girl. And, even though I enjoyed it and all that, it wasn't for me anymore. And so I decided to leave, become a functional medicine certified health coach, a wellness engineer. But now it's all about the nervous system. And yeah, I know you know about that too. So that's where I think the true healing is.
Yeah, so that kind of is a good segue to the next question I had for you. And I've asked this of other people before, and I feel like everyone always has a slightly different question. Sorry, slightly different answer about it. But what causes pain to go from that acute pain that you hurt yourself to something that's chronic and doesn't go away?
Mhm. I've been doing a lot of research, as I'm sure you have. And, we know that the brain, well, at its basic basic purpose. Pain is protection, right? So acute pain, we have an injury, we have pain. That's our body's way of saying, stay off that. I got work to do here. I need to allow this to heal. And so I think what can happen, and I know we a lot of people with pain, it goes back to childhood stuff, decisions we make about ourselves when we're little. We've all had some I didn't have any major trauma, I just had mild trauma. But even that is enough. It's not the event, it's how our nervous system responds to the event, what gets stored in our subconscious mind, because the brain the brain decides what to do. It decides how much pain to turn on or whether or not to turn on pain. So it's taking all the sensory information, outside stuff. It's also like tapping into the storehouse that's in our subconscious mind, and it makes a decision on what to do. And so, because we know, look at placebo effect, look at cases of delayed pain, look at phantom pain. It's all evidence that our brain is deciding what to do. It's not necessarily the physical thing, and there may not even be a physical reason. Or if we think there's a physical reason, our brain takes that information into account as well and says, "Oh, okay, keep it turned on." And then what happens is we have fear about the pain. Of course, I did this. Oh my goodness, what's this mean gonna mean to my future? I'm not gonna be able to do anything. And so the nervous system, of course, shifts out of rest, digest, everything going well because I'm scared. And so it then goes, oh, there's more things to be scared of. I better dial up the pain again. And then we feel more pain and we go, oh my gosh, I've got more pain. And, so it just keeps getting worse. So we get stuck in a pain fear cycle. But it's definitely the brain is involved. And when I say the brain, I mean the brain, the nervous system.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think there's this kind of challenge in saying that the brain is involved because people will often be defensive of like you saying it's all in my head, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not.
No, it's definitely very viscerally real, but I think that there's this idea that the only reason we feel pain is because of our brain, right? Otherwise we wouldn't if our brain was not functioning, we would not feel that pain.
Right.
So it's there for a purpose, right? It has that purpose. And when it kind of just runs off with itself, it's just causing problems all around. The trauma piece you mentioned is super important too, right? I think there's someone I was interviewing some time ago was talking about little t trauma versus
Yeah.
big trauma, right? And that was like, well, I didn't have any trauma growing up, but I think we all do. We all have something, right? It's just how we perceive it in the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, and then our brain is such a its purpose is to learn stuff. So it learns stuff really well, and it can learn pain really well too. And then it's like I kind of think of it sometimes as a field with tall grass, and we get a pathway, and that pathway is grooved really well, and then it's just easier to slip into that groove than to make a new pathway. But
Right.
it's possible to make new pathways. We can do it. The brain is good at learning.
Yeah, yeah, it wants to learn.
Yep.
It really does.
Yep.
Okay, so when you start to talk about like this sort of thing, people often get into the idea of mindset and this concept of like ancient spiritual practices. And how do you kind of blend? I mean, as an engineer, how do you blend the science with these ancient practices to create something that can provide healing?
I've always, even though I'm an engineer, I always had this sort of spiritual interest, I would say. Even as a little kid, I remember probably being like 7, 8 years old, and my mother would take us to the library, and I discovered the occult section. And
Ooh,
so I was always really interested in that. And then even years before the pain came on for me, I had read Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, and fascinated by the connection between thoughts and emotions and pain and illness in the body. And, I'd done Reiki training, I did Tai Chi, so I was familiar with all the power of the breath and all that. But what I found was as I started doing research, my research to figure this out, I would see that there was science backing up the power of breath work, the power of meditation. And also even like delving into the quantum physics, I'm not necessarily, an expert in it, but I do find it super fascinating, this idea that we create physical reality proven by quantum physics. Quantum physics tells us that everything is energy. 99 We are 99.9999999% energy. And so that is proven by science. Hard to get our brains around that. We feel very, very physical.
Yeah.
We don't feel like energy. But I just find it super interesting that I think science and spirituality is just coming together. There's a physicist, I don't know if you've heard of him, Nassim Haramein. Have you
Yes,
heard?
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
And he says that spirituality is just physics they haven't found an equation for yet.
That sounds accurate, actually, doesn't it?
I think so. I think so because what we're seeing is that this newer quantum science is proving some of the things from that we ancient spiritual wisdom traditions have been saying for years that we are energy, we are spirit. Spirit lives on forever. Energy doesn't change form, right? We know from science. So I think it's merging together.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic to get into physics. I could probably talk about it forever. I'm not super good with it, but my brother has a PhD in physics, so he's the physics guy, and then we talk about biology, and they intertwine so much more than I think scientists believe they do, right? They are connected. This is why I kind of feel like modern medicine is missing out on a lot of these things, or conventional medicine. It doesn't
Yeah.
have that physics connection. It's like that can't be to do with the body. It's so bizarre, isn't it?
And it's all separate, like, even the way our whole medical system is set up where we've got specialists in, the circulatory system or a heart specialist. I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really liked about functional medicine is that looks at the whole person and not even just the whole physical body, but the mind, body, spirit. It's all one.
Yeah. All connected. That's great. So the way you approach this, you have your pain-free by design blueprint. Do you want to explain to the audience what that is?
Mm. I love my engineering terms. So, so the design blueprint is basically everything that I learned and then applied to myself and then have been teaching in my programs over the years. I developed a process. And so I call that the design blueprint. So the word design is an acronym for the 6 steps in the process, which are desire, explore, surrender, integrate, generate, navigate. And then what I have in those 6 steps are 2 habits for each step. Because really, I talk about we create this physical body. Our mind creates the body, but we have to change what we're thinking about, and so that we change our actions. 90%, they say that 90% of our thoughts and behaviors are on repeat. So we can't keep repeating the same things and expect a different outcome.
Yeah.
So to change it, we need to change habits. So I'm basically helping people with new habits to regulate the nervous system. And then when the nervous system is regulated, and as it's being regulated, it's shifting the body into rest, digest, repair. It can heal in that state. So it just makes, I'm like a big systems thinker, and it just makes sense. And I don't think anyone conventional or any other type of medical people would argue that, oh, there's nothing that's not going to help, getting the nervous system regulated. We know it's foundational to everything. It affects every system in our body. So, and our bodies have this miraculous wisdom. It will heal if we give it the right environment. So we've got to be the ones to give it the environment. And no one else can do it for you. That's why I teach
Mhm.
nervous system regulation, because no one else can regulate your nervous system. You can do things like it's the great tools that you have to help. Okay, this is what it's like. Okay, nervous system, it feels like this to be regulated. But, you can't put that down and then go around thinking, "Oh, this life is awful and there's no hope," because you'll just shift back in again. So I love having the tools and the habits.
Yeah, habits are something, right? Once you can create a habit, you're golden because it's something you just do without even thinking about it. And this concept of mindset and training the brain is so important because if it's working against you, you're never going to win. As you say, like you can keep regulating your nervous system with the tools, but then as you say, you walk around and you're thinking, "Oh, my life sucks, and I'm in pain all the time." this is going to get worse. It's going to come back. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of defeat.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I had the pain and I know you have too. And I understand, if you've got pain, it's calling your attention and it's awful. And if we want something different, we can't focus on the pain.
Right.
We, we can't. And I'm not saying you're not justified. If anyone wants to keep focusing on their pain and be there, like that's okay. I'm not trying to change your minds. But if I'm talking to the people who want something different. And so if you want something different, you have to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Does the design blueprint also apply to chronic disease as well, or do you kind of stick in the lane of pain management or pain resolution?
I honestly believe it can really help anything. But, if someone comes to me with something that I'm not familiar with, I'm not as comfortable. I've studied pain so much that I'm totally comfortable with that. But if someone came to me, like what's an example? Like diabetes, for example. I think if you regulate your nervous system, that's going to help with that. But I don't know. I haven't dove into diabetes. I
Right.
didn't have an experience with diabetes myself. So that's, even though I think it could help you, I probably wouldn't work with someone like that. But the steps, yes, I think they could help for sure.
And so how do people learn more about the design blueprint? Like you've kind of mentioned there's these habits, and I'm sure people are like, I would love to know what some of these are.
Mm.
Like, what's the best way for them to figure that out?
Well, they could follow me on my website and I got a YouTube channel. So my website's thewellnessengineer.com, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram at Jane Hogan Health. And I've written a book that's coming out called Pain Free on Purpose.
Yes.
Use your mind to heal your body and get your life back. And it's sort of my story woven in with all the habits. So I lead people through the habits and have the resources in there. So that's coming out in July 2025. But I'm starting a group if anyone wants to be in my insider circle. They can do that, and then they'll get early access to resources. And I'm going to be doing reading of some of the chapters, so they'll get early access to some of that as well, and be the first ones to get access to the book.
Awesome. Yes. And we will share all of that information with our listeners as well if you check out the show notes. So you'll be able to see all of that stuff there. Well, thank you, Jane, for joining us today. This was great. I think we've got a kind of a teaser into the way to heal. And it's true. Like if you can regulate your nervous system, if you can take control of this fantastic machine that we are as a human being, you're going to be able to make a difference. And I do strongly believe, just as you say, that it will apply to almost everything in life. If you can improve your mindset, if you can control your brain, if you can create positivity, you will live positivity as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and we still need to feel our emotions, so there's that as well. We're not trying to, like, deny when we're feeling bad and stuffing it down, but where are we most of the time? That's what's gonna matter.
Yes, absolutely. Great parting words. So thank you again, Jane, for joining us. And to all of our listeners, I will, as I said, include all of Jane's contact info in the show notes at painfreeforlife.com/podcast. Until next time, I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and you're listening to Pain Free for Life.
Thanks for listening to Pain Free for Life. Be sure to follow us, share the show with family and friends, and leave us a review on iTunes. Every time you share the show, you are helping someone take their life back from pain. Visit painfreeforlife.com for more resources, including our free guides to microcurrent, the Hache protocol and inflammation, as well as our blog and online community full of people just like you, successfully overcoming all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And stay tuned for the next episode of Pain Free for Life.